Oliver had always been a man of habits. Every day began and ended the same way. From work to home, from dinner to the couch, then sleep. His life seemed simple and predictable, like a good old movie that you could watch endlessly, knowing every twist and turn of the plot. He was used to the routine and considered it his anchor of stability. 16 years of marriage with Victoria was full of its ups and downs, but in his heart, Oliver always believed that together they could overcome any difficulties. Love did not have to be perfect, he reflected. The important thing was to keep fighting. Today the day started as usual. Morning coffee, work calls, dealing with emails, everything went on as usual until a sharp pain in his side made him stop around noon. Oliver grimaced, put his hand to his side, and tried to calm down, thinking it was just normal fatigue. The pain would not let go, though. It pierced through his consciousness like a sharp knife. The supervisor, noticing Oliver's discomfort, advised him to go home and rest. "Come back when you refine," the supervisor said good-naturedly, and Oliver left the office feeling relieved to be able to rest for a few hours. All he could think about was climbing into bed and sleeping through the evening. As he pulled up in front of the house, his heart gave an unpleasant tingle. His gaze locked on Eric's car parked in his driveway. It was not unusual. Eric, his best friend of nearly 20 years, often dropped by unannounced. Oliver knew Victoria was always excited to see him. Still, something was not right. Maybe it was the very silence enveloping the house, or the strange cold feeling in his chest. He'd always considered himself a rational man, and this feeling seemed irrational to him. But it was there. Oliver put his hand to the door. It was locked. Victoria never locked her doors during the day, especially when someone was in the house. Oliver's eyebrows furrowed, but he simply took his keys out of his pocket and opened the door. His footsteps echoed down the empty hallway, all too quiet. There was something wrong in the air, as if the space itself was telling him to leave, to look no further. He continued walking, listening to the silence. Suddenly he heard a faint sound, like the distant rustling of cloth, muffled voices. Oliver stopped, frozen in place. His heart began to pound faster, though his mind tried to convince him he was wrong. But his body knew the truth before his brain could process the information. Oliver took a step forward, and then another, slowly, as if each movement required incredible effort. The sounds grew louder. Voices. He realized they were not just conversations. These sounds were filled with things Oliver would never want to hear. Seconds lasted an eternity until he found himself in front of the bedroom door. Its handle was cold when he grasped it, but instead of swinging the door open abruptly, he froze, giving himself one last moment of calm before his world changed forever. Oliver slowly opened the door. His gaze fell on the bed, and he felt something inside tearing apart. Victoria, his wife, was there on the bed, and next to her was Eric. They froze when they saw him. Victoria, naked, was sitting on top of Eric, their bodies entwined and their faces instantly pale. For a moment, Oliver felt like an observer in his own nightmare, as if this was not happening to him, but to someone else. He was paralyzed. Not a word escaped Oliver's lips. Images began to flash through his mind. Years of living together, Victoria's smiles, evening dinners, walks together. It all felt false. He closed his eyes, and suddenly everything was in motion. Victoria hurriedly bounced to the side, pulling the sheet toward her, trying to cover herself. Eric jumped off the bed, stumbling clumsily to the floor. "Oliver, wait!" Victoria shouted, her voice full of panic but also somehow cold. Eric remained silent, standing against the wall like a beaten dog. Oliver looked at them, at their helpless faces, at their awkward movements. These were no longer the people he knew. He opened his mouth, but could not find the words. Instead of exploding with anger, as would have been logical, he suddenly felt utterly devastated. All that remained in his mind was the quiet echo of betrayal. Oliver turned away and walked silently out of the room. His feet led him to the door on their own, as if he were in some kind of trance. He opened it, stepped out of the house without closing the door behind him, and headed for the car. There was not a single word behind him, not a single apology. There was dead silence all around. Oliver got behind the wheel and sat there for a while, staring out the front window, unable to make the next move. Everything he had known and loved crumbled in an instant, like a house of cards. Silence enveloped him, but instead of chaos, he felt only a cold calm inside. Oliver started the car and drove away, not knowing where he was going or what would happen next. Oliver sat at the bar, twirling his whiskey glass indifferently in his hands. His gaze was blank and his mind was in chaos. The whiskey brought no solace, not the first or second drink. Even the third glass could not drown out the heaviness that was crushing him from the inside. Everything that had happened a few hours ago did not fit in his mind. The betrayal of Victoria and Eric, their helpless faces, their pathetic attempts to justify themselves. It seemed like it was somewhere far away, like another world, and he was just an observer. "Why are you so glum?" Jay the bartender's voice brought him out of his trance. Oliver lifted his head and looked at him. He'd known Jay for a long time, but he'd never told him about his problems. Now, however, something inside him broke, and the words came out on their own. Everything fell apart. Oliver said quietly, his voice shaking. He felt the anger inside him, hidden under a layer of devastation, begin to rise to the surface. At first, it was a barely perceptible heat, but it was quickly turning into a flame. Jay moved closer, leaning over the counter. He'd always been a good listener, no unnecessary questions, no unnecessary conclusions. "Tell me about it," he said quietly, letting me know he was ready to listen. Oliver sighed and began to talk. He told everything from the moment he'd seen Erica's car outside his house to the minute he'd caught them in his bedroom. When Oliver finished, the bar seemed even quieter than before. Even the clinking of glasses and the chatter of other customers seemed to have faded into the background. Jay did not say anything right away. He just looked at Oliver with understanding, nodding slowly. "So what's next?" he finally asked. Oliver raised his eyebrows in surprise. "What next?" he asked, as if he did not understand the question. Jay calmly wiped his glass with a clean napkin, then looked directly into Oliver's eyes. "You really just gonna let them get away with it?" Those words hit Oliver like a hammer. It suddenly flashed through his mind. "No, I see not just let them go on with their lives like nothing happened." The flames of anger were growing stronger and stronger inside him. He did not know what to do, but he knew for sure that he would not stand idly by any longer. "What do you suggest?" he asked coldly, keeping his gaze on Jay. The bartender grinned slightly. "You know, revenge is a dish served cold. If you're going to hit them, do it smart. Think, not act on emotion. They should be hurt where they do not expect it." Those words sank into Oliver. He continued to sit, feeling his anger and pain transform into something else, a clear thought, a plan. Victoria, her job, her career was her life, her pride. She was always telling him about her accomplishments, about how hard she worked on her projects. "She has an important presentation tomorrow," Oliver said suddenly, more to himself. Jay raised an eyebrow, realizing that new thoughts were beginning to form in Oliver's head. "Well," he said, "everyone has a weakness." Oliver finished his whiskey, stood up abruptly, and headed for the exit. He needed to act. A plan was already maturing in his head. He drove home quickly, all thoughts occupied with only one thing: to find her presentation and do something she would never expect. When he opened the door of the house, everything was quiet. Victoria was not there. On the table in the kitchen stood her work laptop. Oliver walked over to it, not even feeling the inner excitement. All he felt was a strange equanimity. He turned on the laptop and quickly found the file he needed. It was her presentation for a meeting with important clients that she had been preparing for the past few weeks. Oliver opened the file and started looking through the slides. He knew he had to be careful. It had to be done in such a way that the changes would not be conspicuous from start. He started looking for a place where he could add something that would ruin her reputation. After a few minutes, he found the right slide, a slide that talked about the company's international partnerships. Oliver quickly found some images and phrases online that could cause an uproar in the business world, especially at such an important meeting. They were understated, barely noticeable, but provocative enough to ruin her presentation, causing everyone present to question her professionalism. He inserted the images in text, then reviewed the presentation again. Everything looked perfect, nothing glaring. Victoria would no doubt not even notice the changes until just before the presentation. Oliver closed the laptop and stepped away from the table. He knew he'd taken the first step. It was only the beginning. He felt no regret. The storm was still raging inside him, but now it was focused on a specific target. Oliver sat in the semi-darkness of his house, staring at the darkening sky outside the window. His phone was on the table next to him, but the thought of calling anyone seemed pointless. He'd already made his move, implementing Victoria's altered presentation. Tomorrow her world would begin to crumble. But somehow that did not bring relief. The feeling of emptiness and loneliness came on stronger, like a wave washing away everything in its path. The phone vibrated suddenly. Oliver glanced at it, thinking it was Victoria, but another name popped up on the screen. Lauren. Eric's daughter. She rarely called him, much less at this late hour. Oliver froze for a few seconds, unsure if he should pick up the phone. What did she want? But then his fingers automatically reached for the phone. Hello. His voice sounded hoarse, as if he had not spoken in days. There was an indistinct, mumbling voice on the other end of the line. Lauren was clearly drunk. Oliver tensed. Lauren, what's wrong? He asked, trying to catch the meaning of her words. Can you come over? Pick me up. Her voice was weak and braided. I did not want Daddy to find out. Those words prickled Oliver. Was Eric really so in control of his daughter that she could not even have an extra drink without fear of his reaction? Oliver glanced at his watch. It was well past midnight. He did not want to get involved in anyone else's problems, but something in Lauren's voice touched him. She was just as much a victim of circumstance as he was. Where are you? He asked. She dictated the address of a bar that was near the center of town. Oliver sighed, got up from the couch, and grabbed his keys. Everything that was happening suddenly seemed even more surreal to him. All his life he had considered himself a model husband and friend, and now he was about to pick up his former best friend's daughter at a bar in the middle of the night, completely engulfed in a maelstrom of anger and betrayal. When he pulled up to the bar, the street was empty, only a few drunken company slowly dispersing to their homes. Lauren stood against the wall, huddled against it like she was the only support in the world. Oliver walked over to her, and her eyes, clouded by alcohol, glittered at his appearance. Oliver. Her voice was quiet, as if she could not believe he'd actually come. He took her elbow gently, supporting her, and led her to the car. Lauren staggered, but still managed to take a few steps. Opening the door, Oliver helped her into the passenger seat. She smelled of alcohol, but there was something in her gaze that made him freeze for a moment. You not going to tell your father? She muttered as he got behind the wheel. Even though I'm 23 now, he is always very adamant about my drunken parties. And listening to him lecture me one more time is not something I want to do at all, she said. I will not tell, Oliver replied shortly, starting the car. They drove in silence for a few minutes until Lauren spoke again. He is always controlling me. My whole life. Thinks he knows best how I should live my life. Her words were rambling, but they felt like more than just the complaint of a drunk person. And now you know who he really is. Oliver felt a strange commonwealth with her. They were both Eric's victims, each in their own way. Lauren turned away from the window, her head drooping powerlessly against the glass. Oliver thought for a moment that she had fallen asleep, but soon she spoke again, her voice quieter, almost a whisper. Why are you so angry? She asked suddenly, without turning her head. Oliver squeezed the steering wheel. The words stuck in her throat, but there was nothing to answer. She knew why he was angry, and she'd been part of that betrayal herself, albeit unwittingly. When they pulled up in front of her house, Lauren took her time getting out of the car. Her fingers nervously rubbed her seat belt, her eyes staring ahead, but her thoughts seemed to wander somewhere far away. Finally, she turned toward Oliver, and there was something in her eyes that he had not expected to see, sadness, and something deeper, almost devastating. You think revenge makes everything better? Her voice was quiet, but those words seemed to cut the air between them. Oliver did not know what to answer. The rage still raged inside him, but at the same time, this situation with Lauren was confusing him. She was Eric's daughter, but now she seemed lost, just like he was. She reached for him, her fingers gently touching his arm. Oliver tensed, but did not move. Something about her touch was more than just a physical gesture. It carried something more, something he could not immediately grasp. "You want them to pay?" she whispered, her fingers squeezing his hand a little tighter. "There is one way." Her eyes lit up with a strange glint, and she reached for the phone she had in her pocket. Oliver watched as she opened the camera and smiled at him. "Let us take a picture," she said softly. Her voice was slightly mocking, but there was something deeper lurking in it. Oliver did not move, not realizing what she was up to. Lauren moved forward, her face too close to his, the smell of alcohol and her perfume mingling in the air. Her eyes stared straight into his, and for a moment Oliver felt something strange, almost tangible, come between them. Lauren's fingers touched his face again, and before he could stop her, she snapped a picture. She laughed as if it was just a game, but something in her voice and her demeanor told Oliver that it was not just a random act. "You can show this picture to your father," she said, her smile becoming strange, almost insane. "He would not like what he sees. It could end everything." Oliver froze, his thoughts spinning like a whirlwind. She was ready to use their closeness as a weapon against her own father. Oliver could have told her it was too much, that it was not right. But the words stuck in his throat. Oliver woke up the next morning with a heavy head and an uneasy feeling inside. The evening with Lauren had left a strange aftertaste, not just from the alcohol he'd drunk, but from how far he'd gone in his revenge. He sat on the edge of the bed, trying to digest everything that had happened in the last few days. Lauren, the picture, Victoria's sabotage. This was no longer just an emotional reaction. It had turned into an elaborate plan of destruction. Barely had he finished his morning coffee before the door swung open abruptly and Victoria burst into the house. Her face was twisted with anger. Oliver instinctively stood up, his body tensing. "You did this. You," she shouted, heading towards him, eyes burning with hatred. Oliver did not move, watching her like a storm that was inevitably approaching. He knew this moment was coming, but he had not expected her to return so quickly. "What did I do?" he asked coldly, though he knew the answer. "You destroyed my presentation." Victoria literally screamed, throwing her bag to the floor, her breathing frequent and ragged. "Do you know what it looked like? How I embarrassed myself in front of everyone. They all laughed at me." Oliver remained silent, watching her every move carefully. She was not just angry, she was humiliated, shattered, her world beginning to crumble right before his eyes. This was what he wanted, and this was it. "You think this is funny?" she continued, clenching her fists. "Are you pleased with yourself, Oliver? Do you think this revenge will make you happy?" He remained unfazed. Everything inside was empty. Emotions seemed to have been burned out over the past few days. He looked at her face contorted in pain, and felt nothing. Victoria stopped suddenly, taking a deep breath. Her voice became quieter, but no less sharp. "You know, our affair with Eric started long before his wife died. We did not wait for her death to be together. It was much sooner than you might think." Those words should have stabbed Oliver like a knife. But all he felt was a cold shroud covering his mind. This new detail did not change his mind. It only added more detachment to the feeling. "I knew it," he said quietly, his voice sounding unexpectedly calm. Victoria frowned, her eyes roving over his face, searching for some sort of response. But Oliver was no longer the man she knew. He was no longer the victim. He was now the one who watched her world crumble. She turned to leave, grabbing her bag off the floor and headed for the door. "Do you think you won?" she asked on the threshold, her voice full of venom. "You ruined us both, Oliver. All of us." She closed the door sharply behind her, leaving him alone in the cold silence. Oliver stood leaning against the desk, his fingers clutching the phone in his pocket. The only thought going through his mind was that he was not done yet. His hands reached for the phone on their own. He opened the gallery, and there, among the usual snapshots, he found the very picture. Lauren, with her makeup slightly smeared and her eyes clouded, was staring directly into the camera. She seemed deceptively calm in that photo, though he knew there was something more behind that calmness. This was the key to the ultimate revenge. He sent the picture to Eric without further ado. No explanations, no threats. Only the silent destruction he knew would rain down on their lives. No more than 10 minutes had passed when the phone vibrated. A message from Eric. Are you crazy? Oliver only grinned. He could imagine Eric looking at the phone with that very picture on it. His life was on the verge of collapse now, and he knew it. Oliver sat in his living room, feeling the weight of the day weigh on his shoulders. He had won this battle, but what next? An hour passed, maybe two. The house was quiet, only the muffled sounds of street traffic occasionally breaking through the windows. Oliver was still staring at the phone screen, waiting for something, but he did not know what. Suddenly, it rang again. This time it was Eric. UCA not just let this go. He shouted into the phone. I'm going to find you, Oliver. UV ruined everything. Oliver silently listened to his angry cries before simply dropping the call. None of that mattered. He had made his move, and now their lives were inevitably rolling downhill. Destruction was inevitable. Late in the afternoon, he left the house to take a short walk. The city was quiet, as were his thoughts. He walked a few blocks without noticing anything around him until his feet led him to a bar. Levi, the old bartender, greeted him with a quiet nod, as if he knew what he needed. Oliver sat down in his usual spot at the bar, and Levi poured him a whiskey without asking too many questions. Rough day, he finally asked when Oliver took the first sip. Oliver grinned, lowering his gaze into the glass. Rough is not the word. Levi nodded silently. He'd seen enough stories like this to know that sometimes it was better to just pour another glass and let the man digest it all by himself. Hours passed as Oliver drank slowly, feeling the alcohol blurring his thoughts. But it did not fill the inner emptiness. His plan was done. His revenge was accomplished. Victoria had lost her job. Eric now knew his daughter had crossed a line he would never forgive. But instead of satisfaction, there was only a strange, oppressive calm inside Oliver, as if the storm had passed, leaving only ruins behind. He finished the last of his drink, stood up, and walked out into the night without saying goodbye. And that's where today's story ends. Thank you for watching to the end. If you enjoyed it, do not forget to like and comment. We'd love to discuss this story with you. See you in the next video.